Somewhere on the cold edge of the last ice age, a woman sits with her back against a rock. And she has about 4 hours. Not 4 hours until sunrise. No. 4 hours until her body starts making decisions without her. The wind is coming off the ice. Her fingers stopped working properly a while ago. So she's holding the hide against her chest, with her forearms instead. That hide? It's the only thing between her skin and the air. It's not stitched. It's not shaped to her. It's just a dead animal, scraped thin and dried stiff, pressed against a body that lost its own fur more than 1,000,000 years before she was born. This morning, you pulled a shirt over your head. You didn't even think about it. You didn't check the temperature first. You own a second skin, and a spare, and another one hanging in a closet. Just for the days it rains. But for most of the time our species has existed, no one had that. Not one person alive. A human body walked out into the weather with nothing on it at all. Which leaves a strange gap in the story. The fur was gone. Long before the clothes arrived. So how did an animal with no coat survive tens of thousands of winters before anyone on Earth knew how to make one? And when exactly did that change? The answer doesn't come from clothing. Cloth rots. Hide rots. Nothing anyone wore that long ago survived to be dug up. No. The answer comes from an insect. And the date that insect gives you is stranger than the one you would guess. Let's start with what every other animal in the cold does. The Arctic fox? It grows a winter coat so dense it can sleep right on the snow. The musk ox? It carries an undercoat called kiviot, finer than cashmere, warmer than wool. Reindeer even grow hollow hairs that trap air inside each strand. None of these animals invented anything, though. Their bodies simply do it. Every year. On schedule. Your body still tries. And here's what should stop you completely. You carry roughly the same number of hair follicles as a chimpanzee. The count never dropped. What changed was the hair itself, which thinned until most of it became almost invisible. But the machinery stayed. Under each of those follicles sits a small muscle called the erector pili. And when you step out of a shower into cold air, those muscles contract and pull every hair upright. That is what goosebumps are. Your body raising a coat that is no longer there. In a furred mammal, that reflex traps a layer of still air against the skin, slowing heat loss. In you, it does almost nothing. It's a switch still wired to a system that was removed. And the removal? That was early. In 2004, Alan Rogers at the University of Utah published a study on variation in a pigmentation gene called MC1R. Working from a simple logic, permanently dark skin only becomes necessary once the fur shielding that skin is gone. The date that came back was around 1.2 million years ago. In Africa, that was survivable. Bare skin sheds heat. A body that can sweat while it moves can hunt through the middle of the day, when everything with fur is lying in the shade. Nakedness wasn't a weakness there, it was an engine. Then, people walked north. Which brings us back to the insect. 2 kinds of louse live on human beings, and the difference between them? That's the whole story. The head louse lives on your scalp, and feeds there. The body louse feeds on your skin. Sure, but it does not live on you. It lives in your clothing. It lays its eggs in the seams and the fibers. And without clothing, it has nowhere to exist. So the body louse cannot be older than clothing. Which means that if you can date the split between those 2 lice, you've dated the habit of wearing something. In 2003, Ralph Kittler, Manfred Kaiser, and Mark Stonking at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig sequenced DNA from 40 lice. And put a clock on that split. Their estimate came back near 72,000 years, with a wide margin on either side. Stonking's own remark afterward was that people simply assume clothing must be much older than it is. Then, in 2011, Melissa Toops, David Reed, and their colleagues at the University of Florida ran the question again with more genes and a different model. Their answer pushed the date back. Clothing lice separated from head lice at least 83,000 years ago, and possibly as early as 170,000. Now, do the arithmetic. Your ancestors lost their fur around 1.2 million years ago. The strongest genetic evidence for regular clothing lands under 200,000, which leaves something close to 1 million years in between. 1 million years of human beings standing in the weather, with nothing at all between their skin and the sky. But they were not helpless. Fire helps. Shelter helps. And huddling together helps far more than most people assume. Archaeologists have even found stone scrapers, the kind used to strip fat from a hide, going back roughly 780,000 years. This tells us skins were being handled long before anyone made a habit of wearing them. But a scraped hide, that's not clothing in the way you mean the word. And this is where the story turns. Ian Gilligan, an archaeologist at the University of Sydney, has spent his career studying the origins of clothing. He draws a line between two things that look alike, but they are not. Simple clothing is just a skin thrown over your shoulders, covers you. It falls open when you move, letting cold air underneath. At the extremes, it barely matters. But complex clothing, that's cut to shape, is joined together, with sleeves, with legs, with closures. It seals you in. And that difference isn't about fashion. No, that is the difference between surviving a cold night and surviving a cold century. The tools tell you when the second one arrives. Scrapers alone mean hides. Simple hides. But blades, awls, and eyed needles, they mean pieces being cut, holes being pierced, seams being joined. The oldest eyed needle ever recovered came out of Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, found in 2016. Just 7 centimeters of bird bone, with a hole carved through one end, around 50,000 years old, and still sharp enough to use. The layer it came from is not a Homo sapiens layer. It may have been made by Denisovans. Now picture this, that moment when skill had already become ordinary. 34,000 years ago, near what is now the city of Vladimir, in Russia, 2 boys were buried head to head in frozen ground. Their bodies covered in red ochre. Around them lay fox teeth, spears straightened from mammoth ivory, and more than 10,000 ivory beads. Not scattered. No, they were arranged in the shape of garments that rotted away long ago, still holding the outline of sleeves, and hoods, and hems. By some estimates, a single bead took about an hour to carve. 10,000 beads. 10,000 hours of somebody's hands, stitched onto a child's clothing, and then put into the ground. That is not warmth anymore. That is identity. Within 20,000 years of the needle's invention, your ancestors were not only sealing the body against the cold, they were saying something with it. The garment became a message, almost as soon as it became a shelter. And that thread runs all the way to right now. The temperature you keep your room at is not a preference. It is a symptom. A human body with nothing on it stays comfortable only inside a narrow band of warmth. close to the range of an afternoon near the equator. Everything outside that band, every winter you have walked through, every morning you have stood on a cold floor, you got through by wearing the technology. You are a tropical animal. You have always been a tropical animal. Every place you live outside the tropics. You live there on borrowed insulation. And your body was never told. The follicles are still laid out across your skin. Like a chimpanzee's. The small muscles beneath them still fire on schedule. Right now. If someone opened a window behind you, your arms would try to raise a coat that stopped growing more than 1,000,000 years ago. Sit with that for a moment. We tend to treat clothing as decoration. Something added on top of the real business of being human. The shirt you put on this morning is closer to the oldest survival tool your species owns. Older than farming. Older than the wheel. Older than any city, any language you would recognize, any story anyone thought to write down. Your ancestors did not become warm. They became clever. And every one of them who died cold, on a night like the one we started with, is the reason the ones who could sew were the ones who kept going. You are wearing the reason you are here. If you made it this far, you are exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. We make videos like this one. About ancient human behavior, about what your body still remembers. About the gap between the world you were built for and the one you actually live in. If that is something you want more of, hit subscribe. Costs you nothing. And it tells the algorithm this kind of storytelling is worth keeping alive. See you in the next one.